Amina wiped sweat from her brow as she peered into the murky waters of the Niger River. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the riverbank into a furnace. She'd been out for hours, collecting water samples and surveying fish, but her results were disheartening. "Anything?" called her research partner, Emeka, from their small boat offshore. Amina shook her head. "Nothing new. Same low oxygen, same few fish." She sighed, feeling the weight of their failing ecosystem. At 25, Amina was the youngest researcher from Usmanu Danfodio University in Sokoto. Her passion for marine biology had earned her this spot on a critical environmental study. But 6 months in, their findings painted a bleak picture of Nigeria's water crisis. As she bent to collect another sample, a glint caught her eye. Amina squinted, trying to make out what it was. For a moment, she saw a flash of large, iridescent scales. "Emeka," she called. "I think I saw something. Come closer." But as Emeka brought the boat near, the strange shimmer vanished. "What did you see?" Emeka asked. Amina hesitated. "I'm not sure. Probably nothing. This heat is making me crazy." Emeka laughed. "Come on, city girl. Let's head back before you start seeing mermaids." Amina rolled her eyes but smiled as she climbed into the boat. As they motored back, her mind wandered to her grandmother's stories of Mami Wata, the mermaid-like water spirit. Amina had always dismissed them as superstition, but now she felt a shiver despite the heat. That night, walking home, Amina nearly collided with an old woman she'd never seen before. "Oh, sorry, Mama," Amina apologized. The old woman gripped Amina's arm with surprising strength. Her cloudy eyes seemed to bore into Amina's soul. "Be careful, child," the woman rasped. "The river is angry. The old ones are waking." Before Amina could respond, the woman vanished into the darkness. Amina tried to shake off the encounter, but a sense of unease followed her home. That night, her dreams were filled with flashing scales and whispered warnings. The next morning, Amina rushed to an emergency meeting called by Dr. Namani, the lead researcher. As she entered the small conference room, the tense atmosphere hit her like a wave. "Thank you all for coming," Dr. Namani began, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by grim seriousness. "We've received reports of unusual activity in the river. Several fishermen have gone missing in the past week." Murmurs rippled through the room. Amina's mind raced back to the strange sight she glimpsed yesterday. Dr. Namani continued, "The local authorities are dismissing it as accidents, but—" He paused, seeming unsure how to proceed. "There have been sightings of something in the water, something large." Emeka scoffed. "What, like a big catfish?" "No," Dr. Namani said quietly. "Like a woman, but not a woman." The room erupted in a mix of nervous laughter and concerned whispers. Amina felt her blood run cold. "I know how this sounds," Dr. Namani raised his hands. "But we're scientists. We investigate the unknown. I want increased safety precautions, and I want every unusual sighting or event documented. Understood?" As the meeting dispersed, Amina pulled Emeka aside. "I need to tell you something," she said, recounting what she'd seen in the river. Emeka's usual grin faded. "My grandmother used to tell stories," he said slowly, "about river spirits that could appear as beautiful women. They'd lure men to their deaths." "Mami Wata," Amina whispered. Emeka nodded. "I always thought they were just tales to keep kids from drowning. But now—" Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion outside. They rushed to the window to see a crowd gathering by the river's edge. In the center stood a man, soaking wet and wild-eyed. "It was her," he was shouting. "She tried to take me. Beautiful. But her eyes, her teeth." Amina and Emeka exchanged glances before hurrying outside. By the time they reached the man, university security was already ushering him away. but his frantic words hung in the air, feeding the growing sense of unease. Over the next few days, more stories emerged. Fishermen spoke of eerie songs drifting over the water at night. Children claimed to have seen a woman with a fish's tail splashing in the shallows. Each tale added to the tension gripping Sokoto. Amina threw herself into her research, desperate to find a scientific explanation. She analyzed water samples, studied local legends, and interviewed witnesses. But the more she learned, the less things made sense. The water's chemistry was changing in ways she couldn't explain. Concentrations of minerals found only in the deepest parts of the ocean were showing up in the river. And then there were the scales, iridescent, unlike anything from any known fish species, that began washing up on the banks. One evening, as Amina was working late in the lab, she heard a soft melody drifting through the open window. The song was hauntingly beautiful, like nothing she'd ever heard before. Without thinking, she found herself walking towards the river, drawn by the ethereal voice. As she neared the water's edge, Amina saw her, a woman of otherworldly beauty, half submerged in the river. Her long hair shimmered with hints of blue and green, and where her legs should have been, a powerful tail flicked lazily in the current. The creature's eyes met Amina's, and in that moment, all thoughts of scientific inquiry fled. There was only the song, the river, and an overwhelming urge to step into the water. "Amina, stop!" Emika's shout broke the spell. Amina blinked, suddenly aware that she was knee-deep in the river. She scrambled backwards as Emika ran up, grabbing her arm. "What were you thinking?" he panted. Amina shook her head, trying to clear the fog from her mind. I saw her, Emika, the river woman. She's real." Emeka's face paled. "We need to tell Dr. Inamani, now." But as they turned to leave, a chilling laugh echoed across the water. They spun around to see the creature perched on a rock, her tail now transformed into legs. "Clever humans," she said, her voice as mesmerizing as her song. "Always seeking answers, but some questions are better left unasked." "What are you?" Amina found herself asking. The creature's smile revealed rows of sharp teeth. "I am the daughter of the river and the sea. I am vengeance for the poisons you've poured into my home. I am the price of your progress." With that, she dove back into the water, leaving only ripples and a lingering sense of dread. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Dr. Namani's team worked around the clock, documenting sightings and analyzing data. The local government, finally taking the situation seriously, closed off river access and brought in experts from across the country. But the creature, or creatures, as multiple sightings suggested, remained elusive. For every grainy photo or shaky video that surfaced, there were a dozen conflicting accounts. Some described a benevolent spirit, others a vengeful monster. Amina barely slept, driven by a mix of scientific curiosity and a growing sense of responsibility. If these beings were real and if they were lashing out because of environmental damage, wasn't that partly her fault? Hadn't she seen the signs of ecological disaster and failed to sound the alarm loudly enough? As tensions in the city rose, so did the body count. More fishermen disappeared. Then a group of teenagers who'd snuck out for a midnight swim. The police were overwhelmed, and people began taking matters into their own hands. Hunting parties formed, armed with harpoons and homemade explosives. Amina watched in horror as the situation spiraled out of control. This wasn't just a threat to human life anymore. It was a potential ecological catastrophe. If these creatures were real, they were a scientific miracle. Destroying them would be an unthinkable loss. She knew she had to do something. But what could one young scientist do against both a supernatural threat and a mob of angry, frightened people? The answer came from an unexpected source. Late one night, as Amina pored over data in her small apartment, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find the old woman she'd encountered weeks ago. "You've seen her," the woman said without preamble. It wasn't a question. Amina nodded, ushering the woman inside. "Who are you? What do you know about all this?" The old woman settled into a chair with a heavy sigh. "My name is Ada. Was a priestess of the river spirits. Before your universities came, before you decided you knew better than centuries of tradition." Amina bristled at the accusation, but held her tongue. Now wasn't the time for debates about progress versus tradition. Ada continued, "The spirits have always been here, child, protecting the river, keeping balance. But your factories, your pollution, you've wounded the river, wounded them. And now they want revenge." "How do we stop them?" Amina asked. Ada's laugh was without humor. "Stop them? Foolish girl. You don't stop a force of nature. You appease it. You show respect." "How?" "There is a ritual," Ada said slowly. "A way to communicate with the river spirits, to make an offering, seek forgiveness. But it's dangerous. The spirits are angry. They may not listen." Amina leaned forward, hope rising in her chest. "Teach me." The next day, Amina convinced Dr. Namani to let her try the ritual. He was skeptical, but desperate for any solution that didn't involve violence. As the sun set, Amina stood at the river's edge, her heart pounding. She'd memorized the words Ada taught her, gathered the herbs and offerings. Now came the hard part. Taking a deep breath, she waded into the water. "I come with respect," she called out in Hausa. "I come seeking wisdom. I come to listen." For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, slowly, the water around her began to glow. A figure rose from the depths, the same mesmerizing woman creature Amina had seen before. "Why should we listen?" the spirit asked, her voice like silk over steel. "Your kind has done nothing but take, nothing but destroy." Amina swallowed hard. "You're right. We've done great harm, but not all of us. Some of us are trying to heal the river, to make things right. Please, give us a chance to show you." The spirit's eyes narrowed. "Pretty words, but words are wind. We need action. Tell me what to do," Amina pleaded. "I'll do whatever it takes." A cold smile played on the spirit's lips. "Brave little human. Very well. We will give you 1 cycle of the moon, 1 month to prove your kind can change, to begin healing the wounds you've inflicted. If you fail," her teeth glinted in the fading light, "we will wash this entire city clean." With that, the spirit vanished, leaving Amina standing alone in the now dark water. The next month was the most intense of Amina's life. She rallied students, professors, and local officials. They organized massive cleanup efforts, installed water filtration systems, and cracked down on industrial polluters. Amina appeared on radio shows and in marketplaces, spreading the message of river conservation. Some called her crazy, others a hero. But as the deadline approached, Amina was gripped by doubt. Had they done enough? Would it be enough to satisfy beings who thought in centuries rather than days? On the final night, Amina once again stood by the river. The water was clearer now, the banks free of trash. Fish were returning, plants beginning to thrive. But was it enough? As the moon rose, the air grew thick with anticipation. Then, with a sound like rushing wind, the river spirits emerged. Dozens of them, their scales gleaming in the moonlight. Their leader, the one who'd issued the challenge, approached Amina. For a long moment she said nothing, her alien eyes unreadable. Then, slowly, she smiled. Not the cruel smile of before, but something softer. "You've surprised us, little one. We expected failure. We hoped for destruction. Instead, you've given us hope." Amina's knees nearly buckled with relief. Then, You'll leave the city in peace?" The spirit nodded. "For now, but know this. We will be watching, always. If you return to your old ways." "We won't," Amina promised. "I won't let that happen." As the spirits retreated into the water, Amina felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Ada, tears shining in the old woman's eyes. "You've done a great thing, child," Ada said. "You've bridged two worlds, but your work is just beginning." Amina nodded, gazing out at the river. The crisis was over, but the real challenge lay ahead. How to maintain this fragile peace? How to balance progress and preservation? As she watched the moonlight play on the water, Amina made a silent vow. She would dedicate her life to protecting this river, to teaching others the lessons she'd learned. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing worth doing ever was. And who knew? Maybe one day, humans and river spirits could do more than coexist. Maybe they could even become allies in the fight to save Nigeria's waters. As if in answer to her thoughts, a splash and a flash of scales caught her eye. For just a moment, Amina could have sworn she saw a smiling face in the water, beckoning towards a future where magic and science, tradition and progress flowed together as one.